Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB bikini pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Kicking off our Mother's Day series is a 35 weeks pregnant athlete who is on a mission to inspire others to be healthy and happy through goal setting, nutrition, and lifting. She loves helping people learn how to enjoy eating out while still keeping their goals and macros in perspective. With a few weeks left until she welcomes her baby into the world, I'm so excited to have this athlete on and get into so many different topics with her. So welcome to the show, Shayla Hubbard. How are you doing?
So good. Thank you so much, Celeste, for having me on. I couldn't be more excited to chat with you today.
Of course. And, of course, before I get into everything, I have to ask, what is something you do or a ritual you have right before your heel hits the stage?
I would definitely say I pray. I'm just saying that prayer. And also, I feel like I just smile. Like I just get so pumped. I feel like right before you get on stage, I mean, that's like the moment you've been dreaming of for the whole entire prep. And as glamorous as prep can be, I mean, it's a grind, but it's like, that's just your time to shine. And so I just find myself smiling, like pumping myself up to the music, chatting with the girls backstage. And so that's definitely, I find myself doing that every time.
That's awesome. And now I'm going to be talking to you a lot about motherhood and the journey you've been on to actually getting pregnant, which has been crazy. And you're so close to actually having a baby. Welcome into the world. But I do want to talk to you first about your journey through competing. And you actually got into competing after being diagnosed with thyroid cancer at 19 years old, right?
Yes, I did actually.
Okay, so what stage of cancer were you in when you found that out, and what was that like? Why did that inspire competing? Like, walk us through that.
Oh my gosh, Celeste, this is like the craziest story. I will definitely keep it short, but
Okay.
long story short, we didn't really know it was thyroid cancer until after I had actually had the surgery to remove it. And
Wow.
so before the fact, it was just like this nodule on my neck, like it was this big old lump. And I had found it I actually had a concussion. And so I went to the hospital for the concussion, and the doctor was kind of reorienting my face, like looking at my eyes and like checking everything on my head. And he saw this lump and was like, we probably should go get that checked. And so got it checked, and it was like, oh, this is probably benign. They gave me like a 15% chance that it actually was cancer. And they were like, yeah, we'll leave it up to you. And so I prayed about it, and I'm like, should I get this removed? Like, I mean, there's a slight chance that it could be cancer. And I ended up getting it removed. And long story short, it ended up being cancer after the fact. I was extremely lucky, so blessed that they actually didn't find out that it was cancer until after they closed me up. So they removed half my thyroid.
Oh,
And if for those of you who don't really understand what the thyroid is, like if you remove half of the thyroid or if you remove the entire thyroid, especially if the entire thyroid is gone, you definitely will have to be on medication for the rest of your life. And at 19, I just did not want to be on medication by any means. And the fact that they only took half of my thyroid, it made it so that my levels were definitely on the lower end of normal, and my doctor recommended medication. And don't take my word for this. Like, I am all about doing what is right for you and your body. But for me, I tried like as many natural remedies, like lifting, eating right, like nutrition and everything, to try to get my thyroid levels back up to somewhat in the normal range, and was able to do that. And so that was a huge step in my journey, because obviously the thyroid plays a huge deal in your metabolism and things like that. And weight gain, osteoporosis is in my family, which that deals with your bone density, and lifting weights helps with bone density. And so just all of that stuff, like nutrition and fitness, it was already a big part of my life, but it kind of just was more heightened after the thyroid cancer, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that does make sense. So they removed half of your thyroid
Hmm.
and then found out that it was cancerous. So did you have to undergo any treatments after? Or did they remove the side that, I mean, I don't, maybe I'm just sounding, I'm probably sound kind of ignorant about it, but I'm curious, like after you found out, yes, it was cancerous, then how did they approach that treatment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the reason why they only removed half and they closed me up and they're like, "Oh, you're good," was they actually had a rapid on-site pathologist who was there in the actual surgery. Like, I'm knocked out, I'm opened up, and they removed part of the tumor. It was a 3 centimeter nodule, and they spliced it up. They looked at it under the microscope, and the pathologist said it was benign. And so they're
Mhm.
like, "Okay, well, that's good. We got the tumor. We'll leave the other half, close her up. We're good to go." But then afterward, they sent my specimen off to a specialist pathologist on the East Coast, and that pathologist was like, "Okay, this is a very rare form, but it is cancer." But the cancer was encapsulated, which means the
Oh.
margins were completely clean. They got the entire tumor out, which had they not had that, I would have had to go back and get the entire thyroid removed. But because at that point they found that the entire thyroid was like that portion of the tumor was completely removed, I didn't have to have any follow-up treatments or chemo, like it hadn't spread or anything like that. So I was super blessed that that wasn't the case. I just have had to do tons and tons of blood work to follow up
Mhm.
just to be sure that my levels are normal.
Wow. And you mentioned that this inspired you to turn to more of a natural remedy or natural solution to getting your thyroid up to normal levels. And how frequently do you have to check that or monitor that?
So at the time, I think I mean, I was very much so in tune with my doctor. This was back a while ago, so it's been a minute. But but I had to check in and get my blood work like every 6 months, and then it was every year and everything like that. And just it depended on how I was feeling. It depended, like I really just took it based on how I was feeling. And obviously, I wanted to be sure that I wasn't like gaining excessive amounts of weight, because when you have, like, I was hyperthyroidism, which is where
Mm-hmm.
you have extremely fast metabolism. So, all growing up, like, I've never had to worry about what I ate. Like, I was always very, very skinny without having to work on like acknowledging what I ate, basically, just eat whatever. But then after having my thyroid removed, I just definitely had to be a little bit more conscious about what I ate and things like that to not gain weight, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, of course, getting into bodybuilding, we're constantly manipulating what we eat and we're changing our training up and we are monitoring the way our body's responding and looking. So, how did this play a role in your bodybuilding career over time?
Oh, that's a great question. That was huge. Seriously, and I feel so passionate about getting your calories as high as possible. Like during a lot of my preps, I've worked with a team called Team Fit Bliss, and
Mm-hmm.
their philosophy is all about just being so in tune with your body, listening to your body, like not crazy amounts of cardio, not, I mean, obviously you do what you need to do to get stage lean, but it's all about your health. And
Mm-hmm.
it's all about like your psychological, like mind, body, and soul, just everything to make the prep a good experience instead of just something that you're like hating. And then you get on stage and then your metabolism is shot and then you're like left in the dark. Just something that I've really appreciated throughout working with Team Fit Bliss is just that, I mean, the whole mentality, just everything, the holistic approach. I kind of got lost track. What was the question?
No, no, I appreciated that. Like how you got you said you were focused on getting your calories up as high as possible, and I was
That's right.
the emphasis of the metabolism and the changes.
Yes. So with the whole competing and getting into bodybuilding from having um, uh, thyroid cancer and having half a thyroid to where, I mean, the goal is to have your calories as high as possible in the off season so that when you diet down, you're not dieting on 100 calories. That's dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I got
But
you.
yeah, and so I'm a huge, huge fan of reverse dieting, of taking a good off season, of all the shows that I've done. Most of like, I've never done a show back to back. After I see my pictures and after I compete, I usually know exactly what needs to be done in order to prepare for the next show. And so I'll usually go into a pretty extensive off season, get my calories right back up, get my metabolism in a really safe place. And so in between all my shows, I mean, it was at least 9 or 12 months plus in between every show.
Yes, and just for everyone listening, I mean, you've done a total of 4 shows, right? So
Yes.
sometimes we get in this mindset of, I have to keep going. I've been there. I have to keep going. I have to keep going. 10 shows in and the body's shot. And especially in, when we're recording this, it's like people don't know, should I keep prepping? Should I not? Shows keep getting canceled. And there's got to be a moment of, hey, maybe it's best for me to take a step back and do what I need to do for my health and for my body. And what I appreciate about what you said is that you focused on what do I need to do to improve, and you made your health priority because you really have to be more aware. So can you share what would be the negative repercussion for someone like you if they don't, or if you didn't take that time off?
That's a great question. And I haven't seen what would happen in even my own situation if I did compete back to back to back and was in a calorie deficit for way too long. I don't really want to know what that would do to me. But for anybody, I mean, if anybody who is competing like for crazy extended amounts of time, especially being a natural athlete, I mean, your body, your metabolism, it adapts. And so it automatically gets lower. I mean, if you've ever been on stage or if you've ever been stage lean, your body does not like to be that lean. I mean, your sleep quality goes down, your energy level is down, your sex drive is down. Like there's so many things that are just not that enjoyable about being that lean. And so, I mean, especially from a hormonal level, I mean, that's like on a physical feeling level, but I mean, your hormones are doing all sorts of crazy things, just like, what is going on? Why am I so lean? That's why stage, it really should just be like, this is the goal, let's get to stage. And then if you don't have another show coming up, like it shouldn't be to stay stage lean year round.
Yeah, a lot of girls get stuck in that mindset because they like it. It's been positively reinforced looking stage lean or close to stage lean. So to transition into an improvement season can be challenging, mentally for a lot of people. That's what I help people with specifically, is the body image and the food relationship that can come with that. But
yeah,
you have a passion for things like goal setting, as well as teaching people that they can go out to eat or travel and still maintain a successful commitment to their plan and adherence. So I want to hear from you, because I think it makes you a really great example for the people who want to achieve their goals but are maybe thinking, oh, I'm too busy, I'm traveling too much, I can't do it. And so they compare the approach that they want and need to have to the approach that others are taking, or that they expect they need to or should take. So in your case, this meant you had to follow an if it fits your macros approach and eat out regularly due to the travel you're doing for work, which a lot of people don't realize they can do and still achieve their goals. So did you ever doubt yourself or question if your approach was going to get you the results you wanted?
Yes, 100%. I totally was doubtful just because of the stereotype when it comes to dieting. Usually that's not correlated with eating out. I feel like majority of the time when people are on a diet, it's like a meal plan or they eat from home, and it's a very controlled environment. And usually people tend to fall off their plan when there's like your husband or your girlfriend or somebody's like, oh, let's go eat out. And it's like, oh my gosh, no, I can't. I'm on a diet. It's like, oh, come on. And you go out and it's either you fail the diet or you're miserable because you don't know what to order or whatever it is. And so that's the niche that I want to help try to educate people, that you totally 100% you can eat out and still accomplish your fitness goals and your nutrition goals. It definitely takes a little bit more planning and a little bit more work, but it's 100% doable.
Right. And that's definitely a good disclaimer, is don't expect to just go into it and it's going to be easy peasy. You're going to have to track, you're going to have to pre-prepare. There's going to be conscious considerations that go into that. But it's cool to hear that from what your experience was, that you did experience some self-doubt with it because of those ideals and beliefs that have been attached to dieting for so long that are now changing or being challenged. And like you said, you're going to start shining light on that. So of course, when it comes to getting through self-doubt, I think it can be helpful to have those goals in place to see that, this is still going to get me where I want to go. So as someone who is passionate about goal setting, and you talk about this on your Instagram, and you've broken it down into how you set goals based on categories as well as a timeline, can you tell us more or share more of your approach to goal setting that you think others could benefit from?
Yeah, definitely. So as it pertains to goal setting, it seriously is one of my biggest passions in life. Setting goals and really just accomplishing what your potential is. I feel like 99% of this world gets into a ritual, into habits, into just the rut of just everyday life, and people do not accomplish the things that they totally can if they just put their mind to it. And so I feel extremely passionate, whether it's reading books on self-development or goal setting and things like that. But something that I've been doing since 2012 is writing down my goals. And I haven't been perfect every single year, but that's definitely the year that I started was just right after high school. And just setting goals and actually writing them down. And you mentioned the categories. So I have my goals broken up into categories. I have spiritual goals, personal goals, professional goals. That could also be educational goals. If you're in school, there's physical goals and then the financial goals. And then eventually there's long-term goals, whether it's 5-year, 10-year, or lifelong goals. You can have a bucket list. Like there's lots of different ways that you can go about creating goals correctly. But for me, writing them down, and I actually read my goals every single day, and read them this morning, and it was just a good reminder because it's getting toward the end of the month and there's a couple of things that I've said I want to do once a month, and I look at my calendar and I'm like, oh shoot, I haven't done this. So it like keeps me on track and keeps me accountable to the things that I say that I actually want to do, and be sure that I can actually accomplish them.
Does that ever feel overwhelming for you to have all those different categories and goals in front of you?
That's a great question. I think what is even more overwhelming is not writing them down and not having them categorized out, and thinking to yourself in just open space of, oh my gosh, this is the person that I want to be. That is so overwhelming. How do I get there? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so the goals that I've written down, I feel like a lot of the times, like I've sent out my goals. I mean, if you want a copy of my goals, you did it free to DM me on my Instagram and I'll send them to you. But something that just really helps me is having small goals that are almost like a reader. They're not like anything crazy, like I don't even know an example, but just something crazy outrageous. But it's like little daily reminders of things that I want to do, and even habits that I want to do. Like one of my goals is to schedule my priorities and like to check my calendar every morning, and to wake up, I pray, I get ready, I work out, I read my affirmations and my goals, and like I get right out of bed. Like having the structure in the morning, like that doesn't seem like a huge goal, but for me, being accountable and reading that every single day, like that's who I want to be, and that's the structure of how I want every morning to go. And so having that and reading that keeps me accountable, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. And something that I've given to like the people in my on-demand mindset coaching platform is a habit tracker. And my clients love this because they can actually see themselves accomplish it every day, and it's hanging on their wall. And habits are what breed the next version of ourselves, right? It creates
100%.
that's who we are. It's our habits. So, and it's our beliefs and our thoughts and all these other things, combined. But, habits are a big part of that. And what I like about what you said is that's who I want to be. And one of the approaches I encourage people to take is asking yourself, what does the next level or best version or ideal version of myself do in the morning, afternoon, and evening? If you can answer those 3 questions, you have an outline for maybe 3 different rituals you can have in the day that set you up for success. And maybe you just start with, okay, this month I'm focused on getting a morning ritual. And then next month that's already a habit, PM, and then after that, evening. So I love that you said that. And it stands out to me that you said you're really excited about having a morning ritual and you commit to this. And I also appreciate that you're willing to share your goals with anyone who wants them, which I'll make sure your Instagram's in the show notes page too. But if you want to let them know what that Instagram is now, feel if you could, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Shay, SHAY, Hub, HUB Fit, Shay Hub Fit, just because my name is Shayla Hubbard. Fitness account, shorten it all up, Shay Hub Fit.
Yes. Okay, good. So that's just in case someone's listening and is like, wait, I wanted to ask now. So, but what I was kind of branching off of that is you said you love having that morning routine. It's been part of it. What's going to happen when you have your baby? Like, are you already setting new goals, or are you waiting to see what, I mean, because I'm sure you don't really know exactly what to expect. I don't know that anyone could know. So how are you going to, because that's going to be like the control that you have now is probably going to be so different than when there's like another person. So I'm curious how you're
Yes.
approaching this.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is a great question. And I don't even know that I know the answer to this. I'm not a mom yet, so I can try to think what I know it's going to be like, but I already know that whatever I'm thinking, it's probably not going to be accurate. But what I do know is having my expectations in the right place is something that is totally going to keep whatever structure that's going to be fumble jumbled, it's going to make it okay. If my priorities are, if I have a list of my priorities, which I know my husband's a priority, God is a priority, reading my scriptures every day is a priority, like reading my affirmations and like doing something for myself, and working out like 100% and making time to eat and cook food or to go out somewhere, like those things are definitely super important to me. That if I can say to myself, instead of going into like having a baby and saying, okay, now that I have this baby, I'm gonna make the baby fit my schedule. It's like, no, obviously the baby is gonna probably take a higher priority. So if I can just commit to myself that those priorities to me are going to maintain a priority when the baby's sleeping, if I need to take a nap, like that's totally fine. Like if I can have the expectation that things aren't going to be perfect and that I might not get to everything every single day and that I can forgive myself for it, if I absolutely did try my best, I'm going to be okay. As long as my priorities are in line and my expectations are clean, and I'll definitely be revamping my goals. I've got my goals out here in front of me, that I'm going to prioritize my overall health and be patient and loving toward my changing body during pregnancy and postpartum journey, just because I have no idea what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
But expectations are going to be huge.
I love that. I think that's so important in any stage of life, any phase of life, any goal, or anything. We have to know what our expectations are. And I always like to think of it in terms of circumstance as well. Like we can't have expectations that aren't in alignment with the circumstance. So if you know circumstances have changed or are going to change, then we also must be prepared to change our expectations. Kind of like when you go from prep to an improvement season, you can't have the same expectations of yourself as you did on prep. It's just not the same circumstance. So I like that you're taking that in consideration and saying, if you keep your priorities at the top of your mind and that's what you focus on, then you can be forgiving and loving and kind to yourself, not, with the what ifs that may come with it.
Absolutely. And I think too, with pregnancy, everybody's pregnancy is so different. For me, I have been extremely sick. It has been extremely hard to eat protein. Protein has made me want to throw up like nothing else that I could possibly eat. But lifting has been extremely hard, like in the beginning part of pregnancy for sure. So I hate to make a blanket statement. For me, that's how it was, but that's definitely not the case for everybody else's pregnancy. But setting the expectation that I'm not beating myself up over, oh, I can't make it to the gym today. I'm so bad. I'm going to lose muscle. Like, oh, my goals. It's like, no, the expectation is if you feel good, you're going to go lift and you're going to have a freaking awesome workout. But if it's just going to be an okay workout, if you can tell yourself that you tried your hardest, good job. Like you succeeded for the day. But like having the expectation that you're going to try your absolute best and accomplish that, you're going to be okay. But even if it's not a good day, just forgive yourself and move on. Like you're pregnant, it's fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I like that you talked about how it can look different for everybody. And so what were some of those other experiences you've had maybe throughout your pregnancy that have impacted your training or nutrition, or maybe changed your approach to it based on hormones or how you were feeling, all that?
Yeah. I've been flexible dieting and not tracking macros during my pregnancy. I have some friends where they track their whole pregnancy and they love it. For me, that wasn't feasible. Just food aversions, which if you don't know what those are, it's just crazy. I seriously, the body is amazing. It is mind blowing how crazy things can change when it comes to like what foods you're craving, what food tastes good. Where I tell my husband, asks, he's being so kind because he knows how sick I am and is like, hey, can I make you something? And I'm like, yeah, will you make me this? This is all I want. And I put a bite in my mouth an hour later, as soon as he's spent all this time, and I like spit it out and I'm like, oh my gosh, get this out of the kitchen. Like, I'm going to throw up, get this away from me, you know? So food aversions have been so dramatic. I hate to say that, but so just the changing in my palate, food smells, food tastes, protein like chicken and meats, and like craving things like Sour Patch watermelons or like cereal is crazy. So like things like that. The nausea is pretty, I mean, again, this is different for everybody. For me, I have been nauseous every day for it. I stopped taking nausea medication at 30 weeks,
Mhm.
which is a long time to be nauseous. Usually I had people tell me, they're like, oh, just make it through the next couple weeks. Like you'll probably start feeling better at like 12 weeks or 16 weeks. And I'm like, 30 weeks along, I'm like, I'm still waiting to feel better because I'm not feeling
Dang.
better yet, you know? But it's different for everybody. And no, I know we'll get into the infertility stuff later, but one of my biggest pet peeves is pregnant women that complain. And so I gotta backtrack here and say I 100% cannot say any of this without expressing my gratitude for being pregnant. You asked the question specifically to what's been a little bit harder to make it like to hit your macros or to like get your training in. Just some of the side effects for pregnancy for me made it extremely difficult. And so, but regardless of like the crazy symptoms, I cannot like I have never felt more gratitude in my heart to be pregnant. And I've never
Mm.
felt more grateful to feel nauseous every single day. And it's going to be so worth it. So I'm excited to meet her to make it all worth it.
That's so awesome. I love to hear that. And um I can tell, you have a lot of gratitude for this, and I know your experience leading up to it was really challenging. And when you reached out to me and you shared some of your story, I was just really excited to talk to you and very inspired. And I wanted to specifically ask you about this wave, this like spiritual wave you described to me in the message that moved you to start a family right after you earned your pro card, because you originally were going to go straight to Portland after you earned your pro card at USA's, but
Mm-hmm.
then you got that inspiration to get pregnant, start a family. So what was that experience like for you? What changed?
Yeah. So as you've heard me mention, I mean, God is a huge part of my life, and I rely on Him for so much. And every huge major decision, I always ask Him, whether it's, "Hey, this is what I'm planning on doing. What do you think?" Or, "Oh, I'm trying to make this decision. Like, what do you think?" You know, like I'm always trying to have that conversation and dialogue with Him. So after I got my pro card, it was seriously so much immense gratitude and just, oh my gosh, like this has been my absolute goal. I love everything. Like I'm so, so, so grateful that I was able to earn my pro card. And as you know, I mean, as I mentioned, like normally I would just hop right into an off season because seeing my pictures, getting judges' feedback, I'm like, okay, I know exactly what I want to do to improve and to start my pro debut. Like I know exactly what I want to do. And so as I was getting ready and thinking, I know what I want to do, I wanted to to pray and ask and see, like, should I just hop right in and start my pro debut and go to the IFBB Portland Classic, which was only like 2 or 3 weeks after USA's, and it would have just been super easy. Maintain my physique, hop on stage. The stage shots wouldn't have been much different, but I wanted to maybe switch up my posing routine or just do some different things to get a feel for the pro stage before taking an off season and then
Mm-hmm.
working toward competing at the pro level. And it was super interesting to get the answer of, nope, let's start a family, or it's time for you to start a family. And I remember like it hit me so hard, and a lot of answers that I receive from God aren't that black and white, But for this one, it was, you know what? It's time. It's good. It's time. And I remember bringing it up to my husband, and he's like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I'm down. Let's start a family. And it wasn't anything to where I felt like we would get pregnant right away. It was almost ambiguous on whether or not we would get pregnant or how soon we would get pregnant. That was an interesting feeling, to not know when we would actually get pregnant, but to know that, yes, we 100% do. It was a really cool experience.
That's really awesome. Where it was like, okay, I realize this is actually the path that I'm going to be taking and I want to commit to taking. And your husband's like, yep, let's definitely do that. And then it was just, okay, let's see when it happens. There's no attachment to the outcome. But I'm curious if you ever thought about starting a family before you got hit with that pull too.
What do you mean?
Did you ever think about starting a family before you had that conversation with God and you were
Gotcha.
guided to?
Yeah. Uh-huh. So at that point, we had been married for 2.5 years, and we knew we wanted to start a family, like maybe around 3 years, maybe. I mean, people will give their 2 cents all the time. And depending on who you talk to, it's like, oh, 2.5 years, you guys are babies. You guys got forever until you should start a family. Or some people being like, oh, you still got lots of time, or vice versa. Anyway, but so, and I don't like people imposing on personal decisions, because depending on you, your spouse, whoever it is that you're wanting to start a family with, like, that is totally between you two and God, or just between you two, depending on your religious and feelings about that. But it is so personal. And so I don't think there's a right or wrong. But for us, we definitely, that was in the future. But I feel like at that time of me competing, it was more of a selfish of like, oh, these are my goals. This is what I want. And it kind of took God a little nudge to say, how about you start a family instead? And then it kind of brought up the conversation with me and my husband to be like, oh, you know what? We probably should. It sounds like it just felt right.
And how did you know? And I know you expressed that it wasn't about other people, it was really between you two and God. So, how did you know it was genuinely a good time for you to commit to building a family with consideration for things like financial resources, health, the state of your relationship, maybe where you were both at in your life? Like, how did you know it was a good time? And, with your competing as well, how did you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this is such an individual question for each person. For us, I mean, we were looking to buy a new home, and that was that was kind of the first step of, we want to upsize. I mean, we were in just like a little single bedroom little place that we were renting. It was so itty bitty and definitely didn't have room for a baby. And so financially speaking, I mean, we both had decent jobs that were able to help us look to buy a home. And so financially speaking, that was like the number one, I would say, more of like from a logical standpoint. Like, my husband and I, we didn't get married until after we had both graduated from college. Like, he for sure wanted to be financially stable before getting married, even though we totally would have gotten married during college, because just the butterflies, and it's like, oh, like, we love each other, let's get married. And it's like, no. He's very logical. I love him for that, because he definitely balances out my emotion. But so logically, it made sense from a financial perspective, from a religious perspective. Personally, we just felt like it was a good time for us.
That's awesome. And of course, after earning your pro card and making this decision and going through that thought process and having that conversation, what contributed, or what do you think contributed to the infertility you experienced in trying to get pregnant?
That is a great question. So we had no idea what to expect. We had heard of people like, oh, we struggled to get pregnant, or like, oh, we tried for a while. We didn't have any personal experience with, I mean, anybody we knew really close who went through infertility. And so when I was getting my birth control removed, I had an IUD, and my PA was like, oh yeah, like, get back to me in a year. If you guys aren't pregnant, we'll look more into it and stuff like that. And we didn't really have like a background of what it was like to go through something like that. And so as we were trying, I mean, for those of you who know like what getting pregnant consists of, besides the intimacy, like there's a really, really small window every month, ovulation, that's like a very small window to be able to get pregnant in. And it's so interesting. I mean, when you decide I want to start a family, there, like that's, you want it. Like you don't want it next month, like you want it this month. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so like once that decision was made, it was like, oh, like I'm so excited. And then all of a sudden you start your period and you're like, oh, dang it. Okay, I guess we'll try in 2 more weeks, because ovulation is about 14 days or so, depending on the person, after you start your period. And so then it's like, oh, then you try, and it's like, oh, am I going to start my period? Ugh, I started again. And it was like this constant, like up, down, like up, yes, no, like just this constant, like back and forth, to finally led us to get a semen analysis for my husband, just because it was, I think that's probably one of the most inexpensive ways to check for infertility. And we found out the issue was actually on his side. I hadn't gotten checked at that point, but I mean, regardless of whose side it was on, it's our deal. It's between him and I. So whether it was him or whether it was me, it was our issue, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what were the next steps?
So after getting his semen analysis done and getting the results back, and it was, I mean, there's lots of different things that it could be. But for him, it was like with the concentration, it was the shape, it was like there were just lots of things, like genetically speaking, that he couldn't really control. And so we were referred to our urologist and made a game plan with him. And we were supposed to get on a series of medications. And so the whole, like, looking at it from a macro perspective, how it was supposed to go was, okay, we'll do medications for several months. If that doesn't work, we'll move on to IUI, which is intrauterine insemination, if you've ever heard of that, which is where they take the man's sperm and they put it inside the women's uterus. Hopefully that will help them conceive. So that's IUI. And then we'll do that like 5 or 6 times. And then if that doesn't work, you go into IVF, which is in vitro fertilization, which is where they take the guy's sperm. They have to extract an egg from the female, and they create an embryo basically outside of the body, and then they implant it back into the woman. So that was like the full perspective there. And had we gone through the entire track that they were expecting, it could have gone anywhere from like 1.5 to 2 years from that point.
Mm-hmm.
It was like this long road ahead. And so when the PA was like, yeah, looking at these results, don't expect to get pregnant anytime soon, it was like, like knowing that I wanted to be pregnant yesterday, knowing the future of what, I mean, after meeting with the urologist and like getting the long-term game plan, it was like, it was devastating. It's a very sensitive topic for sure.
Because you wanted it then, and you guys were really excited, and then you had been trying, and then you got this news, and it was like, okay, now you may go on this long journey to something that you really want. If you don't mind me asking, what was the emotional impact or even mental impact in your relationship because of this?
Yeah, so it was really hard, because obviously, I mean, when you're trying to conceive and trying to have start a family, I hate to say that it kind of takes the romance out of the intimacy sometimes, just because you're like on a ticking time clock. You're like, okay, my ovulation could be anywhere between 12 and 24 hours. So I pee on a stick, like it sounds so funny, but with the technology that we have these days, you can track your ovulation, whether it's with your cervical fluid, whether you pee and you dip the little stick in there, and it'll tell you if you're ovulating. Like there's lots of different ways, like your temperature and things like that. And just by nature of being a competitor, I think a lot of people can relate to this, and just being and liking to track.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, I love to track my weight. I love to track my macros. I love to track ovulation and when we had sex and like all this stuff. So I love the data. And so, I mean, it definitely impacted our relationship for sure, because it's like with the infertility medicine for sure, that took a hit on him when it came to sex drive, energy levels, sleep quality. He lost like 25 pounds and didn't have 25 pounds to lose. The poor guy, like, he was a completely different person, sadly. Like a lot of guys, they just give their biological contribution and the woman gets pregnant and la la la, you know what I mean? But for him, he definitely had to sacrifice for the family. And that was really, it was humbling to see him go through that, because physically speaking, that was really hard for him. And it was also hard for us, because that was like nobody, I mean, that's not an ideal situation whatsoever when you're trying to have a family and you need to be intimate. And then the medications that you're on to help you get pregnant, like make your sex drive to the floor. Like,
wow.
And that, anyway, it was definitely a hard journey for sure.
So how long after, since, with the eagle view, it's like, okay, it should have or might have taken this long. At what point did you guys realize, oh my gosh, we're pregnant?
So that's where it was seriously like when I got the positive test, I just started bawling. And I was so grateful. Like I just dropped to my knees, and I was so grateful that journey was for the most part over, because obviously miscarriage was still an option anyway. Like there's still a chance for miscarriage and stuff like that. But anyway, that we had our appointment with our urologist that day to do but like to start IUI, which was that like second process. So we got pregnant a lot faster than I was expecting us to. We still tried for over a year, but considering when we got the answer from our PA, like you're not going to be pregnant for a long time, like we were expecting it to be 2 years, and the fact that it was a year, we felt really blessed to have gotten pregnant after like using just the medication, because I know that's definitely not the case for a lot of people. Where was I? I lost my train of thought.
I don't know. I was honestly just taking that in.
It was, yeah. So it was, at what point did you actually find out you were pregnant? Yes. So it was after, it was the medication that ultimately resulted in it. And that day, like that morning, I took the positive test. And so we went to the appointment, and it was like, hey, we're pregnant. It was like, oh, perfect. We don't have to do IUI, and we can start down this other route. And so my husband had to stay on the medication until I was well into my second trimester, just in case, because majority of miscarriages happen in the first trimester, which is a whole nother topic. Like whether it's infertility, whether it's a miscarriage, a loss of a child, like not being able to conceive, I have so much compassion for anybody who has to go through anything like that. It's seriously it's like totally out of your control. And when you're doing absolutely everything that you feel like you can be doing, and your intentions are so pure, you're like, I just want a little baby. Like, I just want to start a family. And you see people who have a one night stand and they get pregnant, or people that are like, oh, like, whoops, we're pregnant, like surprise. Or like, oh, well, you're way too young. Like, you don't need, like, you guys have time, like all this stuff. It's like, you don't want to hear that. And it's hard to go through things like that when people don't understand the emotional effect and the physical effect of like wanting a child. It's so much deeper than I ever thought it would ever be.
I appreciate your perspective on that. And I think at least there were a few questions submitted by listeners too, and I think now's a good time to ask you about that, because sometimes when people think about committing to starting a family, they think that means they have to put a pause on their fitness career or even risk their journey as a competitor altogether, since no one really knows what to expect postpartum. And I've seen others argue that it's a great time for restoration, and I imagine it would be a really awesome experience, like you had mentioned before, for truly learning how strong your body can communicate. So how have your fitness career goals or goals regarding your maybe future in competing shifted or changed since getting pregnant?
That's such a great question. I mean, when it comes to getting pregnant, probably one of the first things being a competitor that comes to your mind is weight gain, right? Like, oh, and then also your belly is going to double in the circumference, if not more. You know what I mean? Like your body is going to change drastically. the effects of your training and your nutrition and things like that. Like there's so many changes, there's so many unknowns. And I think just coming out of a show to thinking I want to get pregnant was scary for me, to say, oh my gosh, like I'm going from being stage lean and I want to start a family to like, how much weight am I going to gain? Like, oh my gosh, like my body's going to change. Like I'm never going to look like this again. Like, can I even compete at the pro level? Like stretch marks and like getting huge, like being pregnant and like all this stuff. One thing that really helped shift my perspective was the infertility and wanting it so bad and not being able to have it for so long. That, I mean, it's been over almost 2 years since I've competed, because literally the number one goal has been to start a family. And obviously that's taken some time. But I mean, in the end, like it's all about the expectations. Like when you get pregnant, the expectation is you're going to gain weight. And when you get pregnant, the expectation is you're probably not going to see the stage for a little bit and your body's going to change. But I mean, you see so many women who are successful, like even in the IFBB Pro League. I mean, Janet Leung, I can't remember how to pronounce her last name, but she's probably one of the first people who comes to mind. I mean, she won the Arnold. She's been in the top for the Olympia for who knows how long. Like she looks phenomenal and she's had a kid. Like you totally can come back after having a kid, but I think just your expectations just really have to be in line, and your goals need to be in line with that, because they can definitely go unrealistic and you can have that mental game to not accomplish an unrealistic goal.
Absolutely. And it is amazing. There are so many women in the IFBB Pro League who are incredible competitors, who have gone through multiple pregnancies, or who have, many children, or who don't ever want them either. And so it's just really cool to see how these different women interact with the sport and how they approach the way they see their body and the way they see their kids and their family. And I've gained so much insight from many of them who have come on. And something that always surprises me is like when the first thought is, oh, how much weight am I going to gain? Or will my body ever look the same? Something I've always heard is like, yes, but like the love you have for your kid at the end of the day outweighs all of that potential, and I can imagine like that must be going through your mind of like, wow, you said it a few times even on this episode, just wow, the body is amazing, the body is incredible. And you've talked about in your post, like, you're literally growing a child, and then to have gone through all that infertility experience and be like wanting it so bad, I imagine that must have put things in perspective for you when it came to how you may approach competing moving forward.
Oh, 100%. I know my mindset was totally different coming out of a show and thinking selfishly, oh, how is pregnancy going to change my body? And not really thinking about like, I need to put on weight to be in a healthy place hormonally to even start a child. I mean, I know to start a child, that doesn't make sense. To grow a child, to say that correctly. I know a lot of women, when they do get down to stage lean, they lose their period. And to a lot of people, it's like, celebrate, like no bleeding, like no period, no cramps, like all this stuff, like, heck yeah. For me, hormones affect everybody differently. For me, when I earned my pro card, I was actually having a period twice a month. And so I was bleeding during ovulation and I was bleeding for my period. And that doesn't normally happen, but when you get down to like extremely lean levels, your body does crazy things. And when you're competing back to back to back and your hormones and your body like isn't having a period, that's basically your body saying you can't make a baby right now. And so after you compete, you have to put on weight to even get to the spot to where you can't even make a baby. You know what I mean? Which actually, this is super interesting. I feel like I got a lot of people who almost self-diagnosed me and my husband for not being able to get pregnant because of fitness. And that was extremely frustrating. I told you earlier that, regardless whose end it was on, I ended up getting like fully checked to be sure, like while my husband was on the medication, I wanted to be sure that I didn't have any infertility on my side. And so I had the full 10 yards, like, and getting checked on my end and everything was fine. But when people would ask, like, oh, so like, what are your plans? Like, are you going to compete? And I'm like, no, we're actually trying to start a family. And they're like, oh, cool. Like, well, how's that going? I'm like, well, we're going through infertility right now. And that's when I feel like a lot of people would almost self-diagnose or say, oh, it's probably because you're too lean, right? Oh, it's probably because of the fitness. It's probably because you lift too much. It's probably because you lift too often, or like all this stuff. And it's like, can you just shut up?
Right.
Like, can you not self-diagnose? Like, we actually know the problem. Thanks for asking. Don't need your opinion. But no, that's not the reason. Thanks, though.
I'll be honest with you. I had all these questions planned to ask you about your menstrual cycles and to talk to you about what I did assume it was you. And I'm just being very transparent because I don't know, that's the story, that's the story we tell ourselves. So I think if I'm transparent, it'll help others who maybe thought that it was you too, to see that it's not. I don't know that it's because it's like I think some people come from that place of like, let me just justify why I don't do these things by blaming. I do think there's a lot of that out there, and that's super annoying. But I think from a competitor perspective, it's because it's a fear. Like, it is something I fear so much, and I'm not going to get into it because I'm going to get so emotional about it. But like, I lost my period for so long and I worked so hard to get it back. And what was going through my head was like, I'd love to be able to start a family one day. That would be so awesome. And so I think, oh my God, why am I so bad? I think it's because it's like the fear is that competing will take such a toll, or fitness, or this commitment, or the dieting, or being at certain levels of leanness and wanting to pursue personal goals that really matter beyond surface level, beyond the physique, beyond the stage, but because there's something deep within us that really drives us as competitors, as that really makes you want to compete and really fulfills you with it, those moments, those preps, those commitments. And then there's that sometimes that downside where it's like some people get really impacted. And I remember thinking, oh, like, I don't ever want to give this up for that. But at the same time, that's very important to me. So I think it comes from a place of fear, honestly, which is why I had prepped so many questions about it, because it is something that I know not just myself, but others think, that could play a big role. But you mentioned your hormones did change a lot during your lean phases and all that, but that wasn't the cause of your personal experience with infertility. And I think that's a great reminder for everyone that it goes both ways. It's a team effort, and we could be careful with our assumptions and maybe understand where our assumptions are coming from before we make them.
100%. Celeste, seriously, like, your response there resonated with me so much. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your thoughts there. Because seriously, it's so true. I mean, I even thought to myself, I'm the problem. Like, no way, it's my husband's problem. Like, he's in great shape. He's like, there's nothing wrong with him. Like, it's got to be on me,
Mm-hmm.
And so I even thought that it was my fault, like, in quotes. Right. Like, the infertility was on my side. But it's so true. Like, you see so many people who are so stage lean, or they miss their period, or they talk about the hormones and stuff like that. And yes, 100%, it does affect it. And I know a lot of people who, being stage lean for so long, or even exercising, like, it does cause issues with their fertility. So I don't think you're wrong in even thinking that it totally could have been on my end, because that's what I thought. That's what a lot of people have thought, because they're the self-diagnosers for sure. But I mean, it's just crazy that, like, that cannot go unnoticed, because anyway, I don't need to beat a dead horse, but definitely it's not healthy to be stage lean, especially when it comes to baby making. And like you said, I mean, I'm curious even for you, and I've seen other people who have to like try to get their period back. I mean, what was that like for you to get your period back?
It sucked because for so long, like, I just ignored the problem. Oh, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. I just want to commit to competing. And then after I went through like 5 shows, competed for like a year straight, and I was like, this is probably something I really need to address now. Like, I can't just sweep this under the rug or pretend it doesn't exist. And it's obviously for more reasons than just because I want to have a family one day, but I know it's not healthy to go without a period, but it's normalized in competing as it's fine. Well, just because something's normal doesn't mean it's okay. And so I had to go on this whole journey, and I stopped working with my coach, not because my coach was bad at all. No, he was encouraging me that I needed to sort that out before I even thought about stepping on stage again. But like, I gained a lot of weight because of the actions I took to get my period back. I was like, let me just throw everything at the wall, hope something sticks. And that was hard because people thought, oh, she rebounded, oh, this and that. And I had my moments where it was tough, but no, I really was just committed to get my period back. And it took me like straight up a year. And actually, well, it took, I shouldn't say a year, it took me around 6 or so months, and I finally got it. But that was after not having it for like 2 years, and then I wanted to make sure it stuck, you know? So
Yeah.
when I finally got it, though, it was emotional. And I will say there were times where I thought, oh, I'm not as much of a woman, or I'm not as healthy, or I'm not as capable, or I'm not as it sucks. Sometimes I couldn't relate to people when they talked about their period anymore. I didn't feel like I was like in that. I don't know how to describe it. I just felt inadequate in some ways too. So it was really important to me to get it back. And then I got it back, and that was really awesome. But my body's fighting me again, and it sucks because it's like I can relate to what you said about comparing to people who are having an easier time with something you struggle with. And I felt that a lot. Like, why do they get to keep their period and I don't? Why can they be like lean and have it and I can't? So those are some of the thoughts that I've gone through my head and used to. But like, that process was also extremely empowering. I'm not going to blab too long because people don't come on this show necessarily just to hear what I have to say. But like, that process was very empowering, and allowed me to see like that I can commit to my health and my needs, and that at the end of the day, that's more beneficial. And rebalancing my hormones, I believe truly, and giving myself a break from dieting truly allowed me to then have a very fulfilling and successful prep that I've had. And now this reverse diet I'm in. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you even posted about this just recently and talking about like other people judging or other people trying to make assumptions on like what you're going through. And I think, I mean, as it pertains to infertility, whether it's, I mean, this pertains to so many things. I mean, assumptions, there's nothing good about assumptions because majority of the time they're probably wrong.
Yes.
But there's just so much that people hide. I mean, if you think that somebody has a perfect life, I bet it's because you don't know them very well. I mean, we're all going through something, whether it's infertility, whether it's with our body, whether it's with a job, financial, like spiritual. There's so many things that could be going on with somebody to where, I mean, we literally have no room to judge, no room to assume, because I bet somebody could be going through something just as hard without the person realizing it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And the way we manage and experience different life circumstances and changes is different across the board. So, you know, your pain may seem small to someone else, but if it's a big deal to you, then it's okay if you feel that pain, you know? And I think that's important, like validating your own feelings and not getting in the comparison of the judgment game. And I actually was thinking about what you said too about those fears in the beginning when you got pregnant about, well, like, how will my body change? And you mentioned that this felt it was more selfish in the moment. And looking back, it's like that was because you were coming out of a show. Your mindset was in that place for so long of how does the body look? How am I going to look? All these commitments. So then now that you are about to have and welcome your baby into the world, what are your plans? You had mentioned you're going to be giving yourself a lot of grace, not placing tons of high expectations on yourself. If it's a good day, workout. Like, how are you planning to approach the body love and expressing that love to your body and not falling into the trap of that self-loathing?
Oh my gosh, yes. Serious. I see so many women and even friends that, I mean, pregnancy, it's just your body changes, and I'm gonna do my absolute best to try to get through the whole postpartum thing. I have obviously never gone through that before. That's all. It's the very unknown. But I mean, leaning on prep experience. I mean, fluctuating so much weight. I mean, from stage weight to where I am now, I don't even know that I want to do the math in my head, but it's a lot of weight fluctuation for sure. But I think just being patient, I have a timeline right now. I mean, when it comes to breastfeeding, whether you choose to breastfeed or bottle feed or whatever it is, I mean, some women, they drop weight just like that from breastfeeding. Some people, they hold on to it all. And once they stop breastfeeding, then they're able to diet. And I know a lot of people too coming out of, I mean, if you, right after you give birth, if you start dieting like right after, that actually influences your milk supply. Like there's so many things that I didn't really realize and things that I'm just trying to stay open-minded to because I don't know how my body specifically is going to respond post-baby. And so I have, let's see, what is it, April right now. I'm giving myself about a year and a half or so, like to where I want to, hopefully with the coronavirus and stuff, things are figured out and shows are good, but I would love to compete like fall next year, for example. But I don't have a show in mind. I don't have something so hard fast that if I don't make it there, that I'm going to beat myself up about it,
Right.
But I think just staying open-minded that everybody is different. And I mean, even social media, I mean, you see people like these fitness influencers who have their baby and they post a picture of them in the perfect lighting with a really good outfit or something that makes their waist look really small. It's like, you gave birth last week. Like, how do you look like that? You know what I mean? And so I don't want to get wrapped up in other people because pregnancy, postpartum, so many things about that whole package is so unique to the individual. And so I'm trying to make it very much so about me and my baby and my family, my priorities, my body, and less about, oh, what are other people doing? What do I need to be? What do I need to be to prove myself to other people as an IFBB pro or as somebody who's aspiring to influence in the fitness industry, Like, it's not about trying to prove myself. It's just trying to be comfortable with myself and my own skin, my own goals, and really holding myself accountable to doing my best.
Preach it. I love everything you just said. Like, I hope rewind, play it again, because that was beautiful. And you really cannot go wrong when you're present. You cannot go wrong when you're present with yourself and you have that authenticity and that commitment to yourself, and you are living by your own expectations without shoulds. And I think that's one of the most important things is like never allow yourself to fall into a should mentality. And it's so easy for all of us, to fall into a should mentality because our environment and people, it all plays a role in it, and the things we consume. But I love that you are committed to this, what sounds like a very authentic and transparent and real and genuine connection to just your own unique experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely the goal. And same thing with approaching birth. I mean, I've never given birth before and I have my own fears and hesitations and plans for how I'm hoping that this is going to go, and just just keep the open mind, just stay positive, because that's all you can do, because body and the baby, they know what to do, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but baby's got to come out, so it's we'll make it work.
So much trust that, I mean, I've never been pregnant. I've never been close to it. I had no experience in this, but what I do know is that there are powerful experiences that happen throughout our life. And I imagine that this would be one powerful experience of learning trust and letting go, specifically as it pertains to you and your body, just trusting that your body will do what she needs to.
It is so true. I mean, as I'm preparing for birth, there's tons of birth books, there's courses, there's advice, there's people who want to give you advice and things like that. But to me, and my whole perspective on labor and delivery, my goal is to have a natural birth, like unmedicated. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, I've never given birth before, but from what I've been looking into, women for decades have been trained how to give birth, and that you need medication and you need to do it this way, and we need to rely on all these things and put it in other people's hands. But in my perspective, it's like, no, I have no idea what I'm doing, but my body, my uterus, my baby, they know how to birth. And I just need to listen to them and just try to get in the zone and let them and stay relaxed and calm and let all my hormones and endorphins do the best things do the best they can, and I'll try to stay calm. But that's the goal, because they know how to do it, I don't. And so my goal is to just pass it on to them and God, and hopefully it turns out okay.
I have so many places I want to take this conversation. Do you have anything you do currently to like practice staying calm, since that's something that, you said you're going to probably need to do?
Yes, 100%. So I mentioned earlier, just as we were referencing my goals, I told you I read my goals every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read my goals every day. I look at them every day. But what I actually read are actually affirmations. And the difference between a goal and affirmations, there's slight differences. The goal is like, I will do this. This is the deadline. This is what I'm going to accomplish. The affirmation, from my perspective anyway, it's a positive statement that you say as if it's already been accomplished, and just getting yourself in the right mindset. For example, if your goal is to lose weight, for example, it's like, I will lose 10 pounds by this day for this show or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Your affirmation is, I am so excited that I have accomplished my stage weight, or I'm so excited that I weigh this amount by this day. And it's more so like it's priming your mind to think positively and to think of this goal as already accomplished, because your mind doesn't know the difference between what hasn't happened versus what has, in the sense of an affirmation. Like, if you're reading it as if it's already been accomplished, your mind, and if you can think about it as if it's already been accomplished, your body thinks it already has. So you start to think in the mindset, oh, I've already accomplished this, or this is excuse me, this is what I need to do in order to accomplish it, versus seeing like just the goal of, oh, I need to do this. Oh, it seems so daunting. It seems so far away. But if you can change the perspective to an affirmation format, I don't know if that made sense or not.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
But so I've been listening to a lot of birth affirmations and positivity on affirmations for birth specifically. And so every night when I'm falling asleep, as I'm getting ready for bed, I'm playing my birth affirmations, and it just keeps me calm. I'm practicing what's called hypnobirthing, which is getting yourself into an ultimate state of relaxation and being able to bring that on at a moment's notice. And so basically just putting yourself into an extremely relaxed state. And so for me, I'm just trying my best. I'm practicing listening to these audio recordings that basically just help you get into a very relaxed state, like focusing on your breathing, focusing on your body. And even now, like, I'll practice, like, your balance does not improve with pregnancy by any means. Like, so if I stub my toe, or if I run into a wall or something like that and it hurts, instead of like my body tensing up automatically and be like, oh, that really hurt, like cuss word or whatever, I am practicing, or even with a headache, just like relaxing instead of tension. Because when you're giving birth, from what I've read, like I said, I've never given birth before, but from what I've read, tension, cortisol, stress, I mean, we know this in dieting, that when you have all those negative hormones, your weight spikes, your body is stressed. Like, the last thing it wants to do is let go of weight loss, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so similar for giving birth, if you're stressed, and you have a bunch of cortisol and you're like freaking out and you're clenching, it's like your body doesn't want to bring your baby into what's perceived as an unsafe environment. You're like, the goal is to be absolutely relaxed and bring your baby, like, just let your body work, and let those endorphins, let those hormones, like with oxytocin and dopamine and all those good feelings that are released and secreted when you're positive and when you're relaxed. Those are the positive birthing hormones and endorphins that need to be released during birth, not tension and cortisol.
Absolutely. No, everything you're saying makes total sense. And I love that you are bringing all this up, because there's psychology that backs it. It's not just like you're pulling this out your butt and saying to do it. Because I think sometimes people question things like this. Like, oh, that's woo-woo. That's BS, it doesn't work. But in reality, there's a reason for that. And when you put yourself in a constant state that's like a higher state, or you're able to create essentially anchors. So every time you're doing those like activities of mindfulness, of perceiving your pain differently, or of changing your state, you're creating anchors that hopefully you'll be able to tap into in the moment you need it. And I always think about people who have practiced meditation, and there was this one, I believe he was Buddhist, I don't know, but he had practiced meditation and then like sat in fire, and he sat there completely still, and he had been practicing meditation for so long that he was able to actually control his perception of burning to death. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's just like a very extreme example, but like it's applicable. And then what you were saying too about affirmations versus goal statements, I thought that was really powerful, and something that, you know, if we apply this through psychology, if we apply it through personal development, like psychology says, or there's theories within psychology that says, like, you know, our brain always wants to be in homeostasis, and this is true. Our brain shows us that we want to be in homeostasis because it modifies the production of hormones as well as neurotransmitters in order to keep us there. So if
Mm-hmm.
you say to yourself, or you promote to yourself that you've already accomplished this goal, your body's going to seek ways, your brain's going to seek ways to live in what we call congruency. So you're going to be more likely to take the actions that align you to that goal, because your brain wants you to be congruent. So it's going to, the more you focus on like something you want, the more likely you're going to be to focus on the things that'll get you there, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to throw that in there. It's something I'm super passionate about. And to anyone listening, if you haven't gotten my book, Believe Your Way to Badass, I talk a lot about not so much the psychology side of things, because at that point when I wrote it, I didn't have my psychology degree yet. I wasn't as immersed in it as I am now, but I do get into a lot of the personal development aspect, and I apply the goal setting and the belief statements and all of those things. Mine's definitely more so on the affirmation side, but we also break down the goals into like long-term, short-term, etc. So I just thought that's like a really cool tool for those of you listening. It's an interactive guide, so if you want it, it's Believe Your Way to Badass on Amazon. But Shayla, I appreciate you sharing all of that and what you're doing to really prepare yourself. And I gotta ask, because I've been curious about this since this whole coronavirus started. Like, what has it been like to be pregnant during this time? And are you worried about, having to give birth alone at a hospital? Like,
Yes, that's definitely one of my worries, 100%. Like everything is changing so rapidly. I mean, you've heard in New York that women are literally having to deliver without anybody, without any support person. They literally walk into the hospital, give birth, come out with the baby. They can't bring anybody in there with them. Thankfully, at the hospital where I'm giving birth, they're allowing one person, which is for sure going to be my husband. But it's crazy. I mean, at one point, I remember feeling less concerned about it and thinking, oh, it's more of a hype. Like, we're obviously social distancing. We respect it as it pertains to my baby. Like, everything seems to be fine. I mean, there's not a lot of research. Like, you can't, I mean, anything that I look at or anything when it comes to fitness or macros or nutrition and things like that, my protocol is evidence-based. There has to be research. There has to be evidence behind it for me to really go behind and support it in most cases. And for the coronavirus and pregnancy, it hasn't been around long enough to know what the adverse effects are of being pregnant and having the coronavirus. And so from what we do know, which isn't a lot, I mean, there have been a couple of cases where it does affect the baby, where some of the babies have tested positive or where they have come back with issues to their lungs. There have been some positive women who were pregnant who gave birth to completely healthy babies, but to where they had to quarantine them for 2 weeks from like right after they deliver. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have never felt more motivated to not get the coronavirus if it means that I won't see my baby after I deliver. Like, that sounds so heartbreaking to have to go through that experience and not have that baby on my chest the second is born. You know what I mean? Yeah, so it's been definitely a little scary, but again, going back to the fear, it's out of my control and I can't control it. So me stressing over what could or might happen is that it's not going to help anybody. It's not helping my baby. It's not helping me. And so my goal is to just focus on what I can control, which I know my husband can be there. So we're focusing together. We're just cleaving to each other and hoping that whatever comes, we're just trusting that hopefully the healthcare professionals can help us through it, and obviously doing everything in our power not to get the coronavirus so that I'm not quarantined for my baby for 2 weeks after delivery.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing your perspective on that. And I know it's not something you want to focus on a ton or think about a ton because you are doing so much to manage your emotions and your fears and really keep yourself in a positive state. So I super appreciate you being willing to answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, just everything you've shared has been so insightful and awesome. And I'm wondering if there's anything I didn't touch on that you feel would have been beneficial or that I should have asked you about.
Honestly, no, I thought our conversation was extremely insightful. I mean, even for me, I mean, just the conversation itself, I think, or I hope, my absolute hope is that anything that we've talked about, our conversations, your comments, have inspired anybody to be better, to love their body, to trust their body, to become pregnant, to get their hormones in check, to set goals, to eat out, like I
Go
just
eat
hope
out.
that
Eat
I
some
just
Arby's.
hope, yeah, exactly. I just hope that it's been beneficial to somebody out there somewhere.
Absolutely. I can't imagine why it wouldn't be. You are so amazing, Shayla, and I always love to end my episodes by asking for advice. So if you could give your best advice for the girl who's never competed before but wants to compete, and then the girl who is on her road to pro, what would your advice be for each of them?
Such a good question. Advice for the girl who is wanting to compete is don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. I can't tell you how many people, I mean, my family and everyone, I feel like I surround myself is generally extremely supportive. But for me specifically, competing, being half naked on stage in a very skimpy bikini was not like the easiest thing for my family to accept. And there were definitely some conversations had about doubts and like, why are you doing this? Like, you're a natural athlete, you're competing against like in the NPC or even in the IFBB where there's like, not everybody's natural. Like, what makes you think that you can do this? And it's like people will place those seeds of doubt in your head. But if you want to do it and you want to commit to it, go for it. Like, who says you can't? Your potential is so endless, and you 100% can do it if you put your mind to it. Everybody's journey will be different. Everybody's improvement, like what they need to improve on, will be different. But if you set the goal and if you have that positive mindset of you can accomplish anything, I know for sure people can accomplish whatever they put their mind to. Like, I have no doubt that people are so able to accomplish whatever they put their mind to. And then for the gal who's on her road to pro, just keep going and trying not to let the subjection of the judges deteriorate your self-worth. That's definitely what I would say. I mean, for me, I did 2 national shows before earning my pro card, which I think is a really quick turnaround to become a pro. And I know that there's a lot of women who they compete all year just hoping that those judges will see the good that they have and that they'll earn their spot to get their pro card. And I know a lot of women who take that very personally and they put their worth into that. And it kills me. That's one thing that I hate about the sport. And one thing that is one of my motivations for continuing to compete and hopefully to inspire women that you don't have to take this personally because it is a very subjective sport. Of all the bodybuilding categories, bikini is the most subjective for sure. And just don't take it personally. And if you need to take an off season, take an off season, but don't take it personally because you are worth so much more than a trophy or a pro card.
Boom. Well, I appreciate you sharing that advice and for your perspective and experiences as well in the IFBB Pro League now, and going from having those seeds of doubt placed in your mind to overcoming that and choosing what was best for you and continuously doing that throughout your journey. And inspiring and continuing to inspire. So thank you for that. And I know you gave your Instagram earlier, but I'd love if you could just share it again where people can find and connect with you so that they could reach out to you about the goals or really what I want to say to those listening is Shayla does a really awesome job of like depicting how you can go out to eat. And she shares like real stories of herself doing it. So it's very relatable, and your captions about your body and about your commitments. And I scrolled all the way back to like your journey to competing as well. It's all very inspiring. So you're doing that, and I hope other people go and check you out as well. So can you share them again, what your Instagram handle is?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. Those were really, really
Of
nice words.
course.
So my Instagram handle is Shay Hub Fit. So my name is Shayla Hubbard, and Shay, Shay, Hub, Hub, Fit, Fit. So Shay Hub Fit. Check me out on Instagram. Send me a DM. I'd love to chat with you guys, and I'd also love to hear what you think of the podcast, because this is my first podcast, and I have loved collaborating with Celeste. She is seriously a bundle of joy, so raw, such a good inspiration for the sport. And so honestly, just thanks for even putting out this content. I know you've been doing it for a while, and it's just been such an inspiration. I love listening to your episodes, and I just feel so grateful that I was able to even come on here. So that's a privilege for me.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And yes, you guys tag us as you listen, or, once you listen, share your main takeaways. It's always so fun to get those notifications and see how you guys are liking it. The best compliment you can give is sharing it with a friend as well. That means a lot, posting it to your story, sharing it with your team. And I appreciate that so much. I appreciate you guys' support. And Shayla, thank you again for coming on. And to everyone listening, I'm going to put all the show notes in the episode page. That's celestial.fit/podcast. If you go there, Shayla will have her own category, and you can find her there. Or if you're listening to this right away, it'll be at the very top of the page. And I have episode timestamps as well, which means you can see exactly what we talk about in any episode at any given time, which I think is cool. Or if you ever want to come back and reflect, you'll be able to find that or find where you left off. So with all that being said, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you are listening to this episode.